shekels, check the level. No, you know what I was checking, Jason? Just before, like 10 minutes before you and I are supposed to connect to record this episode. Oh! I mean, 10 minutes before you and I were supposed to record this session, I ordered 2 Mogami XLR cables. They were just delivered. So I quickly undid my old cable, hooked in the new one, and then I rerouted my channel strip back into my mixer. So I'm actually cutting down my signal flow, my signal chain into the computer. So now it goes from my mic into my channel strip, which is my mic pre and my EQ and compressor. And then it's coming right out of the channel strip into my Scarlett interface and then record it into the computer. What it used to do was I'd come out of the mic, go into my channel strip. I'd come out of my channel strip, go into my mixer, where I bring in all the other computers and all the other people and podcast hosts and guests, and then I'd take a direct out of that channel of the mixer into my Scarlett, into the computer. So there's extra cables, 2 extra cables going back and forth. So I was like, it just dawned on me the other day. I'm like, why am I doing that? Why don't I go straight from the channel strip into my computer, clean, and then what I'm doing is I'm taking the insert out of my channel strip and just running it into my mixer. And that's just for monitoring purposes. So, boom.
So before it was a very convoluted process, lots of noise creeping in there, unnecessary cables, unnecessary clutter.
2 unnecessary cables and a mixer.
Yeah.
So, Barry, you like my new setup?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I thought so. Anyway.
Who's Barry?
Oh, you don't know Barry?
Barry sounds awesome.
Barry, he thinks you like Jason
Barry
Sanderson.
White.
No, it's not Barry White. It's Barry, my old maintenance guy from the building I was in. Barry, you know Jason Sanderson, right?
Oh, forget it.
Yep. Come on, everybody. Who doesn't know that? The guy is a recording engineer. He's from podcasttech.com. He works on the Art of Charm show, right? Jeez.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you. All right, well, this is session 60 of the Podcast Engineering Show. Let's do it! Yes! Wow! Yes! This is happening. Me and you. Me here, you there. That's what one of the New York radio hosts says. I forget his name. Anyway, this is the podcast.
Man, that's one hell of an intro. That's one hell of an intro.
Right?
Applaud already.
Dude, it's crazy. The only thing better would be to just add a 1K tone to the mix. I mean, why not?
Oh, dude, nobody wants to hear that.
Well, that's right. Well, this show is all about the audio engineering side of podcast production, okay? This is a more technical show. This isn't how to podcast. This isn't how to get more listeners. We don't talk about marketing. We don't talk about anything else except audio quality and the audio engineering aspects of podcast production. My name's Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of E+, Dun & Bradstreet, Forbes, select business authors. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk hardware, software, everything. We get down and dirty. We talk shop. I have a background in audio engineering, just like Jason, my guest today. Right? For many years, you're a recording engineer.
20 years. It was 97 that I left school and I got an apprenticeship in a studio, and I've been working ever since.
There you go. So when I entered podcasting about 5 years ago, which is same with you, Jason, right?
Yeah.
So I noticed
with that charm.
I noticed that a lot of podcasters and podcast producers, they really don't have a solid audio engineering background. And even just in terms of practical audio engineering, like signal flow and levels and all this stuff. So this show is to help everybody who wants to learn about how to become better in the audio engineering side of podcast production. And of course, I started the school, the Podcast Engineering School, which we had our first batch in the spring of 2017. Second batch is going to be in September 2017. You probably heard a little promo for it right before we got started today. But the Podcast Engineering School, really psyched about that. Today, me and Jason Sanderson are going to hang. he does some work on several different podcast shows, and they're all really top quality, very popular shows too, which is awesome. That's one thing. It's much cooler to work on a show that gets like, hundreds of thousands of downloads, isn't it, Jason?
Well, that's the thing. When I started with Art of Charm, they didn't have nowhere near the kind of downloads that they've got now. I think when I started, it was around about 40,000, I think, which is still huge, right? A month. But now it's like 2-3 million a month, It's like skyrocketed.
Wow.
So, but from that's also got me other shows. Like I'm currently working with Noah Kagan now, and the Ultimate Elf podcast as well, a Canadian show that's also at the top of the iTunes. So 3 really top iTunes shows. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we're going to start with the speed round. As you may or may not know, speed round, we're going to go through wait a second. So do you host any shows yourself?
I've got one, but to be honest, my engineering's that busy right now that's taken a little bit of a backseat.
Oh, okay.
I will be back on it again at some point, maybe sometime later this year.
Okay.
When I find a bit more time. But yeah, for now, I'm just facilitating other people's.
All right. So when we do the speed round, first, you're going to tell us when you're ready to record a show, let's say your own show, and you're ready to sit down to the mic. I want you to start from there and tell me the mic you're using, where it's going into, how you're recording it, and then you can also tell us in general and briefly just overview of how you're doing the post production, like what software you're using and what kind of workflow you have, and all the way up until you create the MP3. So the idea is to go through your whole process and workflow really quickly, and then we're going to spend the rest of the episode picking through it and talking about it. So you think you can do it?
Cool. Yeah. You might get 2 different answers, though, in the different sections. In the quick one, you might get a completely different answer to when we go in detail. Is that all right?
Hey, Barry, do you think Jason can do his speed round in under 60 seconds?
No way.
All right. Well, geez. That's all you have to say?
Nah, it ain't gonna happen.
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, man. Barry's offensive.
That's frightening.
So when you record, start with your mic. What mic do you use?
Look, I think as long as you use a decent quality dynamic mic, you're going to get good results. So right now I'm talking to you just with an SM58. My personal favorite, I really love RE20s. I can't go in the studio without an RE20. I really love them. So that's probably the best answer.
Okay, so then tell me where the signal flows. How do you record it? Just overview your whole workflow real quick.
So again, if we want to identify with other people and what they are doing and trying to get podcasts up quality and quick, I just use something that's accessible, that's something that you can use to get a good signal in. So at the minute, I'm just going into a Zoom H4, and that's going into Pro Tools, and I'm wired then into you through Chrome. That's my simple setup that I've got right here now. But if I was back in my studio, which I'm not in my studio at the moment, I'd be using ProTools HD with a nice quality Neve preamp with a nice quality EV RE20. Horses for courses. Right now, I think I've got a decent sound just out of a 58 and a Zoom recorder, which is totally accessible to everyone.
Right? Oh, I want to know about this Neve preamp. All right, but let's move on. So you have your stuff recorded, or people send you audio. Tell me, overview your post-production real quick.
So my post-production, I'll get the raw files from the different shows that I'm working on. I'm an engineer and editor for the other shows, so I don't tend to record them. I get the audio files. As soon as I get them, I stick them into Isotope RX. I deal with obvious audio issues that I can hear, whether that be clipping, whether that be denoising, or whether that be de-reverbing, leveling the signal out, those kind of things. If it's recorded at the same time live, sometimes I need to do some of the cross-gating stuff. I've just started experimenting a lot with the cross-gating Auphonic, and then I'll take those files into Pro Tools. And then I've got a various signal chain inside Pro Tools that I can talk to you about later in more detail. A few plugins in there. And then I just basically start editing once I've got a balance.
Okay, and you edit in the Pro Tools multitrack?
Yeah, I prefer Pro Tools. It's just something that I'm really comfortable and quick with. I know all the shortcuts, and I work with it like I've been working with it for, well, best part of 10 years, going on 15 years. So like since very early versions. So
right.
I edit in Pro Tools.
Okay, and then you mix it down, you render it out of Pro Tools into a WAV file, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you make it an MP3.
Yep.
How do you make it an MP3?
A few different ways. It depends for which show. I use a real simple MP3 converter called XLD, which is just a lame algorithm, and it just processes it so simply. It's like there's no extra gumph that they're putting in. It's just a very simple, render. And then I use something called KID3 to just tag it, and that's as simple as that. But for some shows, I do it in iTunes so that I can use the Fraunhofer or whatever they call it. I can't remember the name.
Right.
Yeah, and the different codecs. It just depends which show.
Okay, so this is good. I like that. Barry, he did it in 60 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you. Barry,
Hey, I tried.
Barry, what was your reaction to some of our previous guests who didn't play along, who didn't do the speed round quickly? What did you think of that?
It's a mess.
I'm telling you, it's a mess. All right. So let's talk about the RE20. So wait, where are you now and where's your studio?
So I haven't actually got a studio. A lot of my studio stuff's in storage. I had a studio for about 7 years. A music studio, not a podcasting studio. I had a music studio. I actually got into the podcasting world about 5 years ago when I left my studio in hopes of. There's a crazy story, Chris. I bought a church that I was going to renovate into a really big recording studio.
Cool.
Crazy story. A church in England, in the north of England. I did plans. I studied for 3 years designing acoustic architecture, getting the plans passed, really going to town. I was going to go that next step up, but we had problems with the roof, and we lost a third of us budget, nearly 2/3 of us budget actually, on the roof, which into our construction budget, which then we were just, by the end of it, after 3 years of a lot of hard work, I decided to sell it. So at that point,
that's disappointing, because the first thing you think of is a recording studio in a church in England. You got to get Ozzy Osbourne in there. That's my first thought.
Oh man, we had 35 dead bodies. We had a graveyard. Like not many people can say that they own 35 dead bodies. I was going to get Swedish black metal bands to come across and everything, but no, it didn't happen. But it'll happen again at some point. But the best thing about it, Chris, is I learned so much about acoustics, like the plans. I've actually, as a side business, I'm doing studio design for people. I've got 2 studio projects on the go at the minute where I'm designing for people, just literally off the education of going through something so big, so I'm happy about that. But anyway, at that point I was like, I need time out from this studio game. When in my old studio, I was working way too many hours. And if you want to get into this, I mean, there's definitely like bad things about what we are doing where you can literally go insane by control room fever, So I was happy to get out of the studio for once, So that's when I discovered podcasts. I realized that like my relationships were failing in life due to being in the studio 7 days a week, 12-hour days, 12 to 14-hour days in the studio. And I counted up at the end of my 7 years at the studio that I did have, I had 3 weeks in total holiday for the entire 7 years. That's all I had off, working crazy hours. So I realized like my social life, apart from working with bands, like I had none. So that's when I discovered podcasts. I learned about relationships and networking, and it was through actually like listening to The Art of Charm. And I contacted Jordan, who runs that show, and I was like, look, I can help you out by making your show sound better. And I literally at that moment combined my two loves. I combined learning about the self-development stuff that he talks about on his show, all the networking and relationship building, with all the background that I had in audio already. It was a perfect match for me. So that's where that trip started.
Right. Wow. Then you got into podcasting, and
Yep.
That's awesome. It's such a great transition. I mean, obviously I made the same transition pretty much, although I didn't work on as much music as you for that long, for that focused 3 weeks vacation.
Oh, dude, like I've definitely done my mastery. You know, I think is it George Leonard or what's the other one? Robert Greene that talks about the 10,000 hour mastery level skill.
Yeah,
I've definitely done that.
Yeah,
and that's
please.
the thing, right? That's the people talk about, right? People talk about this idea of mastering, right? And I'm sorry, I'm taking a side tangent, but people talk about mastering podcasts, or they talk about mastering audio when they're not actually masters themselves. They've not done that many hours to call themselves a master at this craft. And I guess that's like your target audience right now, I guess, is what you're aiming at, is these people that want to own this craft, you know, like develop this craft to become a master at it, to then be able to say they can master audio, right? Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Because you know as well as I do that when you get really good at audio, there's just, I don't know what it is. It's like life seems easier when you can just get good sound with everything. Not only, you know, podcasts, you know, not only music, but, you know, webinars, anything, even in the car. Like we can make stuff sound good, and it's such a valuable tool for people. So yeah, that's what the podcast engineering school is all about. But,
yeah, man. Like my podcast that I've been doing of my own is all around like creativity, and what I found is that these, like, once you get to a level of mastering your skill, that can transfer to any area of your life. You can take the same progression through photography. You can take the same progression through music. You can take the same progression through acting. Any of these creative arts, you can do the same. You can literally transfer how your learning process of how you've learned one skill to another, and also be able to master that as well. And I think flexibility is something that's like really missing when it comes to, you know, like trying to create a career or trying to create a skill set, and not being able to, and basically locking yourself into something too tightly and not be able to budge. So,
right.
Like what I said earlier, like I obviously, my progression throughout my career has been just in music, but I was able to be flexible to a point where I was able to pivot what it is that I was doing into an area that's way more fruitful. I mean, I've got to tell you, there's not much money that can be earned from recording punk rock bands, but like this industry that we're talking about with podcasts, like I can make a really affluent living now, like where I've never been able to do that before. You know, it's all right in the music industry. It was fine when there was lots of money in the industry. That was like 10 years my senior when I got into it. I've got friends that are like 10 years older than me, and they've got amazing studios, paid for, everything's, you know, they've not got a slight bit of debt because of all this equipment that's already paid for because of when the music industry was thriving. I think now it's like, you know, the podcasting industry is where the money is, I guess, you know. So people have to be flexible and fluid and be able to, you know, use the skills in different areas, but then also take that to a mastering level.
That's right. So yeah, the Art of Charm talks about personal development and stuff, and Barry is also into personal development. I don't know if you knew that, actually. Barry, what is your advice to people? What are people going to need to really succeed in life and be flexible and really achieve success like Jason's talking about?
You're going to need a couple of horses, A couple of mules.
So you mentioned before a Neve. You mentioned a Neve, and when you say the word Neve in front of a recording engineer, you know what happens. I don't know. Anyway,
Well,
tell me about your RE20 and your Neve.
I've got quite a few bits of gear, but not as much as I used to have. Since selling the studio, a lot of it's either gone in storage or I've kept a few select pieces. I've got a Rupert Neve designed Amek preamp compressor. That's sticking with me because I love the compression on it. It's a Neve design. It's very transparent. I can use it as a mix bus compressor, or I can use it as just a standalone compressor. It's very, very fast, but not harsh in any way. It's like musical. I've also got like a Universal Audio 2610 that I've kept with me, and I've got a few self-built 1176 clones that I've made myself. So just from the hairball kits that they call them. So I've got two 1176s as well. So that's pretty much all I've got left now after selling a lot of my equipment. But I've got Amek Einstein 64 channel console. I've got some Genelec monitors. I've got a ProTools HD rig. Just a few other bits and bobs. Like I've got quite a few mics. I've got a nice Neumann mic.
Which one?
It's the Neumann Geffel CMV 563 with an M7 capsule. So it's basically like the original Valve U47. So it's very similar to a Valve U47.
Oh wow!
But it's like a 1950s mic. It's like so old. It's like the same kind of one that you see, the bottleneck one that you see Hitler using. You know, yeah. So it's a really nice mic. I've got some really nice ribbons and things. You know,
nice. Which Genelec monitors do you have?
I've got the 1030s, but I've got the huge sub. I've got the 7060 sub, so it allows me to hear real super lows.
Really?
But I've also got some nice hi-fi speakers that not many people use nowadays, and I think people don't realize what they're missing out when they go back to like 70s hi-fis. You know, I mean, me and you were of a time where you used to play audio in really good quality.
Yeah.
You know?
Remember that? Wow.
I've got some nice 12-inch three-way Sony speakers that sound incredible with a really old Marantz amp with these huge capacitors inside. They sound great. And then I've also got, I'm using right now, I've got AKG 701, the Quincy Jones headphones.
Oh.
And those are like reference mastering quality headphones. So between the headphones, the Genelecs, and my Sonys, I can mix and match and hear what it sounds like as it translates over a big system, a medium system, and the headphones, you know, as well as listening to different earbuds and things. But I've had my Genelecs since I first opened my studio years and years ago. So I'm so used to hearing what they sound like. And I've also like spent the last 2 years traveling in a suitcase around the world, like, and just editing on my laptop. So I'm so used to hearing my AKGs now that I trust them just as much as hearing on the Genelecs. And between the two, I'm feeling confident every time I print a mix.
Wait, so what are the headphones again? The AKGs, are those the Quincy Jones headphones you mentioned?
Yeah, AKG 701s, I think they're called.
Because I've been thinking lately of getting some headphones that are, you know, really good quality for mixing and mastering and things like that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what drove me towards doing it. I had a pair of NS10s for a while with a quad amp, and I'm not knocking them because like they do sound, they're not supposed to sound good,
right?
But with a quad amp, they do sound okay, you know, and they sound powerful. And since I've not had my studio, I've been working in lots of other studios around the world basically, and everyone's got a pair of NS10s, but I needed a pair of headphones that I could get used to and I could hear like these AKGs. They're open back and they're so lightweight on your head that you can't even tell that you're wearing a pair of headphones. It feels like you've got a set of speakers on the side of your head, but like really lightweight. And the frequency range is so dynamic because of flat wound coils that I know that I can trust them now wherever I go. Whereas like even a pair of NS10s that everybody's got in nearly every studio in the world, you can never trust it because you can never trust the room. So
Right.
I know like with these headphones on my head so close to my ears, you know, that I'm going to be able to make some judgments.
Right.
But I ended up selling these NS10s, and I just went back to my General X and with the known trusted sound that I have whenever I'm at home. But I know that now whenever I'm traveling, because I do a lot of traveling, I've always got these AKGs that I can put on my head.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people who produce podcasts and edit podcasts, I think they only have headphones, right? They probably don't have near field monitors, either NS10s or anything. I just bought these Neumann near field monitors. They're awesome.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but so it's interesting that the podcast editors who are only wearing headphones, I mean, you can definitely get used to a pair of headphones, and you kind of have to do it the old-fashioned way, where you mix something on the headphones and then you bring that mix into your car, you play it on your phone, you play it on all kinds of different speakers to hear what it really sounds like, and then you go back and you mix the next, maybe either remix that or mix something else and then reference it in your car and everywhere else, and by continually referencing it other places, that's how you can sort of learn what the headphones sound like, and then that's when you get to that level of trust where you know what you're hearing. But I think the way you did it and the way I'm going to do it is sort of having near field monitors and headphones, and sort of so you can trust one, and then that helps you learn to trust the other one instead of only using headphones.
I think I have a minimum of 3 different ways of monitoring, whether it be music or dialogue. I think it's important to between 3, you've got some kind of balance where if it might sound trebly on one, but it might sound bassy on another, at least you're in a middle ground somewhere,
right.
I mean, I do that with microphones a lot. I use microphones for color and sound, so every microphone's got its characteristic. But if you try between 3 microphones, you're going to get at least one that's good, I know like it's not the same thing, but like with music, I'll definitely balance 3 different tastes of something to get the flavor that I want. It's like with cooking, right?
Right.
If you've only got like 2 ingredients or 1 ingredient, it's going to be a pretty shit meal,
Right.
So like I think definitely try 3 things.
So now when you resume your podcast that you're going to host, you're going to hook up your RE20. Are you going to run that into the Amek preamp and compressor, and then into your Pro Tools?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's as simple as that. There's not really that much detail in that. But what I'd say, when you're talking about referencing, just to flick back there, just to finish with that, most people don't use references, and there isn't a great amount of quantity of good reference sources when it comes to podcasts. Like I'm trying to collect at the minute, like the best shows out there, just to reference against myself, even though I consider like the shows that I work for as up there as the best sounding. It's still important to reference against other people. And one of the cool things that allowed me to know where I am with how I'm balancing my dialogue, I've always used the Abbey Road test disc. So there's a small section on that test disc. If you can get a hold of it, you can probably torrent it, something like that, or buy it if you want. But there's a small section where Alan Parson's talking through, I think he's talking through a Neumann, and you get a full dynamic version of his voice. There's no compression, there's no EQ, there's no nothing, but it's in Abbey Road recorded really well. Like to me, even though that's a quiet signal compared to modern day terms, you still can't beat that. And there's a problem with like people just squashing their audio, right? They think that if you make it louder, that's going to somehow sound better. And I think there's a lot of people that are resulting towards using this Auphonic thing where they just blitz the recording with an auto process and it sticks it loud. There's a problem with that, is that they're just making the same signal louder. They're not working towards making the actual sound of the voice more dynamic, like using EQ in very specific ways to make it sound louder than the actual volume meter. It's not. We don't want to be just looking at -16 on the meter and just going with that. We want to be shaping the voice to fit our ears, and that could be different every time we mic it up. You know, every time we put a mic in, even if it's the same microphone in the same room with the same equipment, the next day it's going to sound different. So that's why you're going to have these like EQ adjustments that you're going to have to do every time you come to your session. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. It happens to my voice. If I use the same rig here in my basement studio and I go to mix episodes of this show, and every episode it's like, oh, my voice sounds a little... It sounds really bassy on this episode. That's weird. So I'll take out a little bit of the low end, and just small tweaks every time. That's for some reason that's just the way it is.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I didn't get too giddy then when you asked me like about the RE20, about the Neve mic, about the Pro Tools rig, and about the channel in that sense. I don't think it's as much about what gear you're using, but how you use that gear. And that's why I thought that was a little bit more of an important thing than saying, oh, this is how I plug it in. It's not really how I plug it in, because the next day when I plug it in the same way, it's not going to sound the same,
Yeah.
But using things like references is going to allow you to get back to that same point. So, like, especially calibrating your setup regularly. So, say if you are working on a show. And obviously, you've got to do these shows as quick as you possibly can to make the money that everybody wants to make a little bit of money. So
right.
You got to knock these shows out in a reasonable amount of time. You sometimes don't get to spend too long actually tweaking from where you've left your last presets or whatever. But I think it's so important to calibrate your show once in a while. So just go through and make sure that you're hitting these reference points of other good sounding shows. Go through and tweak your settings and make sure that like you've got something consistent and that you're not veered away. I've done it a few times with my shows where while I'm rushing to get the show done within my time constraint or my deadline or whatever, I'm uploading something, and I've checked it, and I've checked it a few times, but over the course of a few weeks or even a month, the sound's a little bit more distorted than what it was the last time I calibrated it or whatever, so you've got to keep coming back home with that calibration.
Right.
So using reference sources is the best way that I've found of doing that, and making sure that you do it regularly. Does that make sense?
Great advice. I'm happy you said that. Very important. Very good. Now, let's get to the post-production, because I know you use several plugins, and I really want to go deep into plugins because you're very knowledgeable about the deeper aspects of audio processing. So, okay, so you load the files into Pro Tools. Just tell me about the plugins you use.
So before I actually even get in Pro Tools, I've gone through the RX stage, and I'll have gone through like a D-clip and a D-crackle and listened just in with the effect on only, so that you can hear all the like little clicks and crackles, and so that I want to make sure that I'm never overdoing this stage, because I'm going to be doing my edits from this stage. I'll go through and I don't know about you, but I hate de-reverb. There's so many like bad artifacts of it, and I got really excited when RX6 brought out this new version, when they brought out RX6, because it was better than RX5, but the de-reverb's still not there. But I like to try and get what I can out of that if it's got like a reverby room, say. Right. And I'll also use leveler in there. That's probably one of the best levelers that I've used a few of them. I've tried this Auphonic one. I've tried the Waves Vocal Rider and a bunch of other different levelers and stuff. But I really like the one in Isotope RX.
And do you use it aggressively, that leveler in RX, or do you go easy, gentle?
No, I'm easy. I can tell you a setting.
Awesome.
Give me a second, man.
Yeah, take your time.
I always set my target level at -28 because when I bring that into Pro Tools, I've always got my compressors inside Pro Tools ready to start working at -28. So I know that, like, if I set my level in isotope for all my files that I get sent at -28 with this leveler, I know that instantly when I bring it into Pro Tools, I know that I might be getting like a slight tickle onto my compressors whenever it's like on the loudest bits. I'm never massively compressing. I'm using compressors for the sound more than anything. I really like vintage compressors. I like the way that you can use compressors for tonality. I like that you can use an 1176 to get a more mid-forward sound. You can use a DBX if you want it to be a little bit more scooped. You can use an LA2A if you want it a little bit more rounded. I love the idea of what you can do with Fairchilds and like those other really fancy boutique compressors. But every compressor's got its own sound. So I'm using compressors inside of Pro Tools. At the minute, I'm going through an 1176 phase again. So I'll have an instance of that. But I know that because I've set my leveler in Isotope RX, the second that I get into Pro Tools, I know that it's only going to be slightly tickling. It's going to be nudging, not even like 1 dB of compression on that 1176, but it's going to be working at that level for all my tracks, whether that be the hosts or whether that be the guests. I know that my compressors in Pro Tools are set up ready for that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Does that sound good?
Oh, yeah.
So
Love that.
Yeah. So, but that's not the first in my chain, funnily enough. In Pro Tools, I hit an EQ first, and I'm literally going to do like small surgical cuts from things that I'm not liking, that like I can hear what I've not sorted out in RX. So it can be, I really don't like the high mid-range whistles that you can get, like maybe like 2.46K and 3.1K. There's like an irritating whistle to my ears that I hear a lot in dialogue, especially when it's leveled out later, like when it's going through the any kind of loudness limiter that we've got on the final stage of it. It's sometimes to get it up to that loudness, the -16, you end up with this like whistle, this like high mid whistle, and I hate it. It's like it plagues my ears, especially 3.10, 3.11, 3.12. Those kind of frequencies irritate me. I don't know why, they just do. So I'm surgically cutting frequencies up in that register. But because I'm cutting that kind of frequency, I always have to cut a few lower ones as well. So the kind of low rumble, like the proximity type rumble that you get like around about 100 hertz, and sometimes like a little higher, 130, that kind of thing. And maybe a small little dip in the mid frequencies as well, like 1K. So I'm really doing small little narrowband cuts. That's my first thing as it hits into Pro Tools. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I love that. The narrow band.
Yeah. After that, I'm in a de-esser. I'm just using a Waves Renaissance De-esser. It's nothing special, but I'll use the sidechain input on that and listen to where the frequencies are for that psst, wherever the lispy sibilance is. I'll find that frequency by listening on the sidechain, usually about 7K, between 5 and 7K, somewhere in them areas. And I'll have a little bit of attenuation for those little bits. Way I work, Chris, is I work little bits at a time. So I'll use lots of little amounts of processing. So like I've said, them small little narrow notches in the EQ, a slight reduction on the de-esser, and then I hit my 1176 after that. So there's hardly any gain and more output than anything. I don't want what's modeled as being the input transformer. I want it to more of the output transformer. I like the character of what comes off an 1176 output transformer. So especially the blue stripe one, I've got a model of that I've made a clone. I've made a real version of that, and I love it. The sound that comes off that is great, but I can't take that on the road with me, so I just use the plugin. It's just the Waves one, the CLA Waves one, the Blue Stripe, medium attack, quick release on ratio 4, and I've got it set so that, like I said, when it comes in from isotope, it's only going to be tickling. Maybe sometimes on the loudest bits, it just pins down to 1 or 2 dBs of compression. It's never more than that.
Right.
I don't like using compression for compression's sake. I like using them for the colour and tone, like what I've discussed, for the character. It puts it in a nice place, you know?
Yeah.
After that, it goes into a Waves Scheps EQ. There's the 1073 EQ. And
I
I'm
use that
using
one
this
too.
plugin. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big fan of Neve. We've already discussed this. Whenever I get a chance to work on a real board, I love those sessions. Those are my favourite sessions, working on real Neve boards. I mean, SSLs are cool, but they're clean and they're clinical, and there's not really anything that you can't do with like a digital EQ in a surgical way on those boards. There's nothing character-wise on those boards apart from the compressor, which is what I have on the mix bus. So all my channels go to a mix bus. I have, like there'll be the host one, maybe a second host or whatever, or a guest or another guest. That's kind of a familiar setup to what I'm editing right now. And all these channels go to a mix bus. I've never been a fan of putting my effects processing on a master fader.
Right.
I come from the old style of mixing where you'd sum it through your mix bus before your final master. Your final master wouldn't have any processing on. It'd be recorded into in the old times. It'd be recorded into Sadie, the old BBC system that we used to do mastering on at my old studio. After that, it got, you'd record into Wavelab or whatever. That would be effectively a master fader. I don't like putting processing on master faders. I like to have a mix bus. So I have a separate auxiliary inside Pro Tools that all these channels then come to, and like I just said, the only element of what's a character on an SSL is that mix bus compressor.
Right.
So an SSL mix bus compressor. Same as the 1176. There's next to no reduction on there. It's character, it'll tickle
right
on the loudest bits. Just as a quick side note, make sure that when anybody's using any kind of processing, that when you press bypass, it's the same volume. I've noticed this so much, man, with like other engineers, like they'll bypass something and then the levels will go through the roof, or it'll be really quiet, and they're using like these makeup gains or using the processing to drive a louder or a quieter signal, and it's wrong, man. I don't know whether it's just because I'm from the old school of it, but you should be able to bypass on anything and it still be the same level, so right up until this stage, there's no gain happening. There's no level difference. I could bypass all my plugins and it'd probably be the same volume up until my very last thing, which is whatever I use to slam the volume up. After the SSL, I use a Pultec. It goes through a Pultec on this mix bus, and that's just to get a nice little bit of bottom end and a nice little bit of top end. And I have the attenuation on the bottom end up, so it's doing this like low mid scoop balance between the boost and the attenuate on a Pultec.
Nice.
My last thing in the chain, I just use the inbuilt Pro Tools Maxim limiter. I used to use the Slate FXG, but that's on my other Pro Tools system. That's on my main studio computer. I've not got the license for it on my laptop, so I've basically made a template that I know that I can use on my laptop anywhere. I've got a whole bunch of other licenses and other bunch of software that I can use on my main Pro Tools rig, but for now, because I'm working primarily from this laptop that I can work anywhere from, I'm just using the inbuilt Pro Tools like limiter, peak limiter, I guess.
And how?
And that's where I get my final volume from.
Okay, I was going to say you probably raise the volume quite a bit within that limiter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, in that limiter, it might be like -11 on the threshold with a ceiling at -1.
Got it.
But that's using it to get it up to -16 LUFS. The only thing that I do have on the master is I have a new gen Viz Lim loudness monitor. So basically, I'm monitoring my loudness. I use my master fader for any of the monitoring plugins. So that gives me, so I can monitor the LUFS, the short term and the long term loudness.
And that's actually how you set the final LUFS level, by basically using that meter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't need to go into Auphonic and let it do it for me. I'm monitoring it from there, using the Maxim limiter in conjunction with that to get myself to an average in at -16. And that's the thing, right? I don't mind like my podcast being a little bit quieter than everybody else's. I don't like the loudness wars. I never have done. If somebody needs to turn it up, then somebody can turn their podcast up. I mean, why do we need to battle for the loudest one just so that somebody can, for that instance, be perceived? I've perceived loudness just for that very moment, that instant gratification hit of I've listened to something louder. There's way more negative consequences that come about through slamming your audio, and you know this yourself. You're talking about quality, right, Chris? I mean, you know yourself that it's not all about loudness, it's about the quality of the sound.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to the Scheps 73 plugin that you use,
sure.
and I also use.
Yeah.
I actually, I think the EQ on that is really good, I think. And I especially like the low end and the high end, which, of course, the high end on the EQ it's just one knob. It's 12K, and you could either add or subtract 12K shelving.
Yeah.
How do you use the Scheps 73?
So I'm never put off by these fixed band EQs. I think there's a lot more versatility in these kind of plugins than people give them credit for. It's a 3-band EQ, right? So people are scared of using that because they're not going to get what they want out of it. You can get what you want out of something from just having 2 bands, or even just a tilt, just a treble and bass slider, I mean, I just think about my hi-fi. I think my Marantz amp, that's like this big, huge 70s amp, it's just got a bass, mid, and a treble, and it's fixed frequencies, and you can adjust one and it'll offset the other to eventually get what you need. I mean, the thing about Neves are that they are really broad band EQs. I've already talked to you about me using the narrow band EQ notching earlier on. I'm doing all my surgical cuts there, but what I'm going to use the Neve for is these big, broad paintbrush strokes, of colour. These big sound opening elements. It's not just, I'm not being surgical at all with it. I'm just giving it that final colour, that final bit of taste that it needs. And it's the same with the Pultec. Like, people look at Pultecs, and effectively all a Pultec is a 2-band EQ. It's a bass and a treble, and you've got an option of 20, 30, 60, and 100 in the bass, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, and 16 in the top. And that's all you've got, really, apart from these magic pots called attenuate, which you think, why would you boost something and also attenuate? Well, the way that the Pultec's designed is it's more like a passive EQ. And basically it's like subtractive while it's also boosting. So if you boost and you also cut, it's making the boost and the cut in a completely different place. And if you look on a spectrum analyzer, what it's doing, you can probably get more versatility out of the Pultec than you'd ever imagine. And that's why mastering engineers use them still to today, because you can get so much out of just 2 bands, and people just don't do this. and it just blows my mind why not, because they sound incredible, these units, especially when you use a real one.
Yeah.
Plugin.
So wait, on the first step in your plugin chain is EQ. Which EQ plugin are you using for that?
Oh, I'm just using the inbuilt Pro Tools one.
Okay.
I don't need to be choosy with it.
Right, it's surgical anyway, so you're really being really specific.
Yeah, exactly. With these kind of processors, right, I could swap any one of my plugins in my chain if I wanted to. There's no, I've got no. I mean, I do like the Neves. I do like the 11. I'm going through an 1176 phase. I do like the Pultecs, but I could quite easily live without them and just use the inbuilt ones. I don't think it's necessarily which brand of tools you use, more that you make the best of your tool that you've got. So if you've not got these ones that I've just listed, it doesn't really matter. What you need to be doing is owning in that skill of using it to its best. Hopefully with a little bit like advice from what I've just told you.
Right, yeah, the only difference would be the color, right? Because
yeah. And to be honest, it's your ears. It's teaching your ears to be able to recognize what's right and what's wrong, more than what tool it is that you're using.
Right.
I mean, that's just my thoughts. I think that's why you go to a mastering engineer to do these things, is because they've had that many years and that much experience and know exactly how to get the right sound straight away from what it is that you're doing. I mean, I learned a lot from using Howie Weinberg. Have you ever heard of Howie Weinberg?
Yeah, Howie Weinberg.
Yeah, like the best mastering engineers in the world. He used to work at Master Disc. Now he's got his place. Can't remember what he calls it, but Howie Weinberg is one of the best mastering engineers in the world. I've used him for 4 different projects now. And the first time I sent him some audio, there was big differences. And I took back his really good quality master and looked and got it under a spectral analyzer and looked at the difference between the mix that I'd sent him and the master that I've got at equal perceptive volume, because that's the thing. You don't want to be tricked by your ears by something sounding louder. So I listened at the same kind of volume and matched it and worked and backwards worked what it was that he was doing to my files. And I knew that the second time that I sent a mix to him, I didn't need to do as much as what I thought I had to do in the first place with the other one. And every step up until the 4th time that I've used him, when I got the master back from the 4th time that I've used him, it hardly done anything, you know, and I knew that I was getting that next step of improvement in my own ear training. I looked at what he's done and backwards worked what he was going to do with my material and train my ears to notice those differences. And I think everybody needs to go through that stage. Maybe work with a mastering engineer, work with a mix engineer, just for, even if it's just one project, just to get the skill. I mean, mentorship's huge, man. Yeah. Huge. And I guess that's what you're doing with your project, with your school. And I really, really endorse anyone to go use you and learn from you in that kind of way, and use you as a mentor, because that's going to make the difference. That's going to really make the difference.
Right. So how about tape emulation? Do you use any tape emulation plugins at all?
I mean, I love it. I use them a lot in musical projects, not necessarily in the podcast world. Although, when I record Jordan's voice for Art of Charm, I know that on his Universal Audio Apollo setup that he's got for recording, on the files before I even get them, it's been printed with a Studer tape effect on it. Oh. So the files that I'm getting from him have already got a tape sim on them. So I don't really need to put another one on. I'm doing more surgical corrective stuff and then really broad stroke things. But yeah, I mean, I do like them. I think they really have their place. A lot for me, when it comes to the podcast world, and when it comes to dialogue, is trying to keep things as clean as possible. So if you're trying to get that kind of loudness up there in the -16 area, which is like a common volume, I guess.
Yep.
I mean, it's quite hard to get it up there without distortion. So a lot of my surgical cuts that I've already mentioned are cutting in areas to try and clean the signal up. So I find sometimes, I mean, I have tried various times with tape emulations, and I feel like I'm only adding dirt back in by doing that. And I do get the idea if you need to be able to round off some of the top end and some of the transients. But I think what I'm doing, in my case, why I don't need them, is this hit of this 1176, this hit of this Neve plugin, this hit of this SSL on the mix bus and the Pultec on the mix bus. They are adding that emulation of those transformers in the analog world that would do that same job anyway if you were to just have a tape emulation. Right. If you have a tape emulation, you're only really using it for the sound that the plugin has done an emulation of the tape head and going through that analog circuitry. Well, I've already got 4 or 5 plugins on here that are doing that. So I think that's why I'm not really needing another hit of that. Right. Although I did recently try the Waves NLS Mix Buss. It's not even like a plugin really, because you use 2 instances. You use it on the channel and then you also use it on the mix bus. But it was just giving me a little bit too much drive. And right now I'm going through a clean phase where I'm trying to clean my distorted back catalogue up. I think I've been a bit too driven recently, and I'm kind of backing back away from it now. Right. So, yeah. That's where I'm at with that.
When you get tracks with guests where there's a lot of background noise or just nonsense in the background, I know you clean it up in RX first. How do you handle when there's really a lot of background noise?
I've had that this morning with a podcast that I'm very close to ending my relationship with. Okay. Every time I get one from him, it's extremely noisy. And to say he's the host of the podcast and his audio quality is sometimes way worse than even the guest who's just speaking into their own, laptop microphone. Yeah. I'm just like, every time I'm spending a few more extra hours, maybe I'm billing for the entire project and not the hours, but I should, other projects do hours, but this one in particular, I'm getting really annoyed with the amount of noise. So I feel you when you say that question. So like I say, I do use RX. I use the learn feature. So when I've got it in, let me just go into the noise reduction bit. So I use spectral denoise, and I'll select a small portion of the audio that I can see that's the flat out constant noise, and I'll learn that feature, and then I've got a few settings that I play about with, but basically I'm very flexible. I just keep twiddling stuff until I know that I've got a clean representation as a constant. But when you're talking about these intermittent noises, is that what you was meaning, or was you meaning
no, just
noise?
Like background noise, like an air conditioner running in the background.
So an air conditioning can be done from these constant learning in the spectral noise in RX. So select a small area inside RX and learn that noise profile. That can usually do 90% of the job. But what I tend to have problems with is intermittent sounds that pop up during the show, like maybe somebody puts a pen down on the table or a chair creaks, or in this case the guy never stops moving and rustling things and banging into the mic and all these little things. What I do, inside Pro Tools I have a separate auxiliary that's got the RX monitor plugin enabled. So at any point I can select a small little portion of my audio and use RX to connect through Pro Tools, and I just open that small little part up. I sometimes select small regions of audio using the lasso tool, and I try to delete it with that, or use the learn function again just around that on this specific element. Or recently in RX6 in this release, the dialogue isolate's fantastic. That new plugin that they brought out, I really recommend that. They're doing some magic with that element of it. I use dialogue isolate quite a lot now to get rid of these noises, and I don't know how it does it. It just does a really good job. So does the deconstruct as well. When you've got distortions, when somebody's clipped the signal way too much, if you use an instance of declip to bring back a little bit of the natural dynamic to it, and then use deconstruct to take away that edgy sound of it, sometimes you can get really good results with that. You often lose a lot of top end by doing so, but you can get decent results from reconstructing audio in that way.
Yeah, I love the declip. I haven't tried the dialogue isolate yet. I'm going to have to try that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was very wary about it. In a way, these magic processes that keep popping up, it can put you off kilter a little bit as a professional engineer that's never had these tools.
Yeah.
So, I'm often wary about using them. And to be honest, I've been that way with Auphonic for a while. Like, a lot of my podcast friends have been like, just use it, just use Auphonic. And I'm like, nah, I've got my chops. I don't need to do this. I've got my skills,
Yeah.
But then I have checked out, like, the Crossgate is magic. It does some magic things with isolating vocals. So in combination with that and this dialogue isolate in RX, it does a great job. Some of the things that I tend to use, I'll use the deplosive one in that as well. That's great. Deplosive in RX. That gets rid of a lot of really bad bassy booms when it comes to people popping the microphone. I'm hoping that I've not popped the microphone too much. You've not heard any, have you?
No. Sounds fine.
Oh, good.
Sounds fine. So,
yeah, good.
Yeah. So, well, this has been awesome. I kind of want to talk to you about editing and stuff around editing, because that's a whole nother, that's the next phase.
Sure.
But I think we should maybe, we should have you back in a little while and talk about editing and that kind of thing.
I've got no problem with that. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Chris, and connecting you with you in this way.
Yeah.
Sorry it's been so long. I mean, we've been meaning to do it for a bit.
I know.
Yeah, really, really awesome chat. Where's Barry gone? I need to... Has Barry got a goodbye for me?
Hey, Barry, what did you think of my transition saying that we should have Jason Sanderson back to talk about editing? What did you think about what did you think about my segue?
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
Yeah, it was not good, right? It wasn't good. But.
Me and Barry are not best friends. I'm trying. I'm holding my hand out, ready to, for him to shake it, and I'm ready to give my heart to Barry, but it's just not ready.
Barry, you like Jason Sanderson, right?
Oh, forget it.
Yeah, come on.
Oh, fuck. Sorry, language.
You mean, oh, forget it in a good way, right, Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
There you go. Well, look, if you're listening to this, go to podcasttech.com. That's Jason's site, one of your sites. You have several. And
jasonsanderson.co.uk is my main site. That's for all my engineering and everything. There'll be a new the podcast tech site is in need of a revamp, so there's nothing really much there, but there will be soon, and I have got it in the works.
So it's jasonsanderson.co.uk.
Being from the UK.
Yes, that makes sense. You're from the UK. All right, so this has been awesome. I'm so happy you were able to go into so much detail about the processing and plugins. It really helps our listeners. Our listeners love this. Students of the school love it, and the future students of the school love it. So, Jason, man, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, man, it's been a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I'll have you back. We'll talk about editing. We'll talk about more stuff. There's a lot more to talk about, too, not just editing, because... we can really go deep into some of these things. So, well, there you have it. Thanks for listening to this session. We'll be back soon. Until then, you know what to say.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know what to say. You know. All right, say it now. Sound great.
Walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well, it's quite a feeling, isn't it? They're floating, drifting down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react some empathy. You change your attitude well. You say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. Give up on me well, so change your game and give away. Say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now, it's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react so actively. I want you to know you will never waste me through. I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. And doesn't mean it's still the same. You're pushing me away. The work your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You work your way around somehow now. And yes,